Now that we've learned what template tags are at a basic level and taken a look at a few example ones, let's go ahead and see what we could implement in terms of applying them into a theme. So here's the practice. Go ahead and activate the 1.10 template tags starter theme, open up the index.php, and add whatever template tags you can inside of the loop and outside of the loop, and just see how many different template tags you can get working. Don't feel bad if you break something. Go back and try another one. If you can't figure out how or why something works, don't worry about it. Just add what you can and then come back and we'll look at together how I would approach this and some of the ones that I would use. So go ahead, pause here, bang that out, see how far you could get, and then come back and we'll proceed together. Okay, so I've gone ahead and activated the 1.10 template tag starter theme, and I've opened it up in my code editor here. So the first thing I'm going to do is come into my index.php, and I'm going to make use of the get header tag. So what I could do here is I'm going to actually cut all of this out. I'm going to do Command X, and I'm going to do PHP get header. And this is a WordPress template tag. It doesn't go inside the loop, it goes outside of it. And what it does is it automatically gets a file called header.php. So I could simply create a new file called header.php, paste that stuff in there, and it should still work exactly the same. Now, the other nice thing I could do is do the same thing at the bottom. Cut this out. There isn't much here, but you know, that's okay. It's a good practice and a good one to implement. And I'm going to say get footer. So I'll save that. Then I could create a new file here again, name it footer.php, and paste that in there. Now I'm going to go back to the header in a second, but I'm going to add one more piece of code here, and you may or may not have caught this one depending on how much you looked through the different template tags available. But this one is WP footer. And what this does is gives WordPress a hook to add in especially JavaScript that's going to go at the bottom of your page, but it could be some HTML or other things like that. But it's generally JavaScript. And one of the important things it does is allow the admin toolbar to be used on the front end of the site. So we'll see that when we pop back over to our theme. But nice one there, WP footer. If you didn't see that one, you could add it. Again, you don't have to bust these out into footer and header templates, but it is a good practice. So let's come back into our index.php. I'm sorry, let's come into our header and see what other kind of magic we could work here. So one of the things I will mention, we're going to get rid of how this is being loaded in a few videos here, actually really quick. But for now, we'll leave it in, and I'm going to add another piece of code that will eventually allow us to pull our CSS out of being hard-coded there, and that is WP head. And what this allows is, just like in WP footer, this allows WordPress to hook in this case, it's going to be a little bit more CSS. It might be from a plugin or from your own theme. It might be some JavaScript that needs to go in the head. Whatever it needs to do, up at the way top there, it has access to do that now. So if you don't add those in, the WP footer and WP head, a lot of code and WordPress stuff might not work properly. So good to have. Then I'm going to come down into my body here, and I'm going to add one that you also may not have seen, but it is super cool. And you open up a class tag, and there is a template tag called body class. And I told you before that the loop in WordPress is really smart about figuring out what page you're in. Well, this body class is also really smart about figuring out where you are in WordPress, and it will give you a bunch of custom classes that are really helpful for styling CSS-wise and making tweaks or customizing certain pages and things like that. And just in general, really helpful to have. So I really like adding that in. That's a great one. And I'm going to add one more on this page, and that's going to be using PHP blog info to get the actual name of my site. So before that, I was hard coding it in, and now I'm going to dynamically get it. So I could just say blog info name, and this takes a bunch of different options, things like this, like URL. We'll look at this one a lot later on, but for now, let's just grab the name. Okay, so we've got a lot happening here. We pulled in the header and the footer, and let's just take a sneak peek now before we go any further and see how this is working. Okay, so I've got a static homepage here, and the first thing we notice is, look at this. Our admin toolbar is working, and that's great, and that's because we had those extra WP footer includes in our footer there. And we have the name of our site being dynamically displayed, so that's pretty cool. So now I'm going to open up the inspector and I want to show you a few other things that are happening. So notice that inside of our header now we have a bunch of other files that we didn't put there, and that was from using WP Head, and that's allowing WordPress to function properly. And then at the bottom, again, we didn't put in this WP Admin toolbar. All of this stuff is being added by WP Footer. And the last thing I'll point out is I actually misused this here. It should be just the body class. So let me change that in the code. So I pull this out of here, and that should fix that. Okay, so now we can see class is equal to, and it tells me that I'm on the home. It'll tell me what template I'm using, the actual page ID, whether the person is logged in, whether the admin bar is displaying, customize support, all of these great things, and it'll just change dynamically as you go through the site. So really helpful thing to have there. Now let's come back into our index.php, and we looked at template tags outside of the loop. Now let's hop into it and see what else we could add. So right off the bat, I noticed that we have the H2 and we have the content, but we don't have any wrapper element. So this is something that's really commonly done in WordPress. I'm going to add in an article tag and pop my stuff inside of there. So that's good. Now if there's a bunch of different things, it'll be listed properly and divided into its own little article. Okay, now one nice thing that we could add here is, just like there was a body class, there is also a post class. So we could go ahead and add post class here, and that will give us something very similar to what we had with the body class, but wrapped in this article unique identifier. So that could be helpful there. And then let's come down underneath the content here, and I'm going to create a little footer. And inside of this, I'm going to put in a paragraph tag and give it a class of byline, and that's just kind of a little meta class made up, or you may see in different places, and then we could throw a bunch of different information in here. So the first thing I want to do is get the author information, and I could start with an href and using a tag called get author posts URL. This is a little bit complicated, so I wouldn't expect you to get this one on your own, but like I said, it would just be my approach here and show you something new. So this is going to take in the post author, which is the post ID. So if you ever need to get the ID of a post, remember when you call the post up here, it's making post available here. So we don't always have to use template tags like this. Sometimes we need to grab a raw ID or something, and this is where we could do that. So that's going to give us the URL for the author. And let's break this up into another line so it's easier to read. That's the WordPress way. And then we'll just put in the author. And that will get us the author. So outside of that, we could do a little bit more here. Let's go ahead and get the date or the time. And the best way to do that is to use the time. And that takes a couple different parameters. So we can explore this in more depth later on. I'm just going to show you that there are different ways to format dates. So you could basically get it to say whatever you want it to say. And you'll also notice that there's a date function, and there's some difference between the two. We'll explore that later, just giving you kind of the easy approach at the moment. So formatted date will appear there. We could do the categories of this post, and that looks like the category. And we simply put in between what separator we want. So we'll have commas between the different categories if there's more than one. And we'll put tags last. That makes sense. So this is some pretty generic different options that you'll see. You know, we've got the author, the date, the categories, and for tags this is going to be a little bit different. It wants something to appear before, a separator, and then anything that it could appear after if you're doing a tag cloud or something like that that you need to wrap it in. So those are some basic things we have there. And we'll kind of leave what we have down here intact as it is, because that's a bunch of different new tags that we've seen and a pretty good spread. So let's come over and check this out in our site. So if I simply refresh the page, notice that this is going to be applied to my static home page. But the view I really want to see, I'm going to go into the customizer and change it to be my latest posts on the home page, because that's what I'm really designing for. And later on, we'll see how we could customize different things to appear differently. So we can see we've got the author that links over to the author page, which we haven't customized yet, but we've got the date, we've got the categories separated there. Oh, you can see separated by a comma, but no space. So we could go back into our code and add a space after those commas there. That looks a little bit better. And we could see if there are tags applied, we could see those pop up as well. So this is a pretty good wrap up on template tags. What you probably are curious about from here is, well, how do I use all these different ones and these different places? And that's why we have a whole section of our course set up around template tags. So to review here, hopefully you've had a chance to add some template tags on your own outside the loop, to add some inside the loop. You may have hit some issues not knowing how to use everything. That is completely fine. And then hopefully you have followed along with what I showed you and how I filled it out. Now you could go back and add some more into your practice, or if you're feeling ready, in the next lesson, we're going to talk about conditional tags and how we could use them. That is a big part of PHP writing for WordPress.